Here's what I want you to do. Tell us the story of your problem.
I've been having pretty much on and off back pain and leg pain for about a year and a half now. It's pretty much been really debilitating. I can't box, I can't surf, I can't do jiu-jitsu, I can't really work out. Some days will be totally fine. I'll wake up feeling fine, and by the end of the day, it's like I really have to just like lay down. I can barely walk.
How did the injury start? It was jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, I think, how did it start? I think I felt like a little tear in my hip one time in high school when I was like 16.
Oh, that's how it started.
Yeah,
okay, that's right.
It didn't bother me for years and years and years. And then one day I was just doing jiu-jitsu with my friend and I felt a little pop in my hip. And
point to where you mean by hip, because everybody defines it.
Right, so I actually felt a pop in my groin.
Okay.
So I actually felt the pop deep in my groin. I just assumed it was a groin tear.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks past that, I went for a hike that day, which was really stupid as well.
That's okay. I would have done the same thing.
Yeah. And then ever since then, I started getting like kind of like leg pain that was just kind of like radiating into my butt and down my leg a little bit.
Okay.
And I had no back pain, and so everyone just kind of thought it was sciatica. And my doctor recommended, because he thought it was a groin tear, he recommended that I buy like a yoga belt and strap the yoga belt super tight to my groin, my hip.
Okay. So that was the first doctor that you saw, a chiropractor who thought it was a groin tear. Okay. Right. And he was treating
just a
groin tear. Okay. Yeah. And then fast forward, you've had MRIs of
I've had MRIs,
the back.
MRIs of the back, upper back, lower back, lumbar, and I don't know, what do you call the upper back?
Thoracic.
Thoracic.
And then what did they say the diagnosis was? They were starting to point at the disc, right?
They were one doctor pointed at the discs, but three other doctors said the discs were completely normal and fine for my age.
Okay.
So really, they're really saying that there was absolutely nothing in the back, lower or upper, that could be causing the amount of pain that I've been having. Okay. They also gave me an injection in L4, L5.
Okay.
They also said that I had a small tear in one of my discs, which there's no way to really to heal that unless it's a whole disc replacement, which at my age is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think it's called an annular tear. Annular tear, a tiny annular tear.
So so we started doing. So we're going to document kind of how we determine, because when you first came in, you weren't sure if it was the back or the hip,
right.
And so I'm going to show basically how I figured out it's the hip.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because at this point, it's pretty obvious.
Right. And so we're just going to document it. So if you ever see another chiropractor, they can watch this and just see, oh, that's what that guy's doing. Interesting.
Right.
And then go from there.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other story was you were doing okay for a while. We did some treatment. You did okay.
I did about 8 visits. Or
8 visits, 7, 8 visits, something like that.
Exactly. Actually.
And then you went to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And then what happened there?
I actually got shoulder surgery right after the 7 visits. Completely unrelated incident. But I got shoulder surgery, and I was doing really well. My leg and my back were good. I actually was back to surfing. I was back to playing basketball and volleyball in the days leading up to the surgery. And I was doing pretty well. My leg felt a lot stronger. I felt like I was like way more powerful, which was awesome. And then I went back to Hawaii. Everything was fine. And because I was in a sling, I was playing video games, standing up at a weird angle with my hip in a strange. It was just I was like off. I don't remember if I was off center to the right or the left, but it was for about 8 hours because I was bored. I had nothing else to do.
That's how you recover from surgery.
Yeah. So I just had to play video games for like 8 or 10 hours, and then the next day I woke up with the back pain, just like right back to how it was.
Back pain or hip pain?
It was mostly back pain.
Back pain.
And the groin pain, it's never really directly in the groin. It's always kind of in the butt / the leg. But it kind of skips a big part, and then I can feel it in my calf.
Okay.
And sciatica is usually all the way down, but for some reason I can feel mine just in the calf and in the big butt area.
Okay, so here's how I'm just going to figure out, as if we're starting from scratch, what, whether it's a back problem or a hip problem or a muscle problem or what the heck is going on. Here's some screening tools that I use. So I'm going to have him just try to bend forward and touch his toes. Watch out for this guy. Just let it rain. So go down as far as you can. As far as he goes.
My hamstrings are so tight.
Okay, everybody says they're hamstrings, but do you feel any discomfort in the legs?
Yeah.
Both sides?
Yeah, both sides.
Equal?
Yeah.
Okay, stand up.
Yeah.
Typically sciatica, this is a test a person will get to about 15 degrees and they're not going farther. So if he goes and bends forwards again, and he goes more than 15 degrees,
I can go farther.
he can go farther, but it's not,
Yeah.
that's just, he's not a flexible guy.
Yeah.
But the thing is, typically sciatica is gonna shoot down the leg, one leg, not both legs.
That's right.
Now, if you go backwards, if a person has back pain and they go backwards, what does that do to your pain?
It's fine. Same.
It's fine. So like a McKenzie approach, if he really did have a herniated disc, and that herniated disc was pinching a nerve, and that nerve was going into his groin, backwards bending is gonna help it.
Yeah.
Forward bending, he's not getting far. And nothing really happened. All right, so now let's examine the hip. So that's a screening test for the, go ahead and lie down on your back. That's a screening test for the back. Now I'm gonna do a screening test for the hip. I'm gonna do this leg first to find out what his anatomy will allow. So I'm just gonna do hip flexion. He has pretty good hip flexion. And then I'm gonna check internal rotation, which is this direction. Oof, don't worry about the pot. Now this goes pretty far. It's about, I'm gonna say 45 degrees. And then we're gonna go in this direction, and that goes almost about 85, 80 degrees. Now there should be no pain when you do that in your back. There wasn't on it, okay. So then, on this hip, I'm gonna bring it up. Now the weird thing about this hip, and it's very subtle, is as I bring his hip up in a direct line up this way, his hip wants to stop going in a direct line. If you're listening to your body carefully, and I can feel it,
I can't feel it.
as I go up, it's getting more and more tense. It doesn't like this.
I feel the pain in here.
And he feels a pinch.
Yeah.
So what his leg wants to
Not
do,
super bad, though.
it's not, well, if it was super bad, we'd be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Me and you both. But the thing is, as I go up, it doesn't want to go in that direction. But if I go out, actually, it will allow it. So then, because I'm not that bright and don't have a good memory, I'm going to double check this one. And this is about where it was starting to feel tense.
Yeah, it feels
and
way
his
better.
does not feel tense.
Yeah.
So something is going on with the hip joint. Now that's a screening test. That makes me go, huh. So now I'm going to take it and go internal rotation and look at, even though you're doing better right now, look at how little rotation he has in this direction.
Also something, it's not pain, but something does not feel right in this area.
So you listen to the patient. Something doesn't feel right, but whether he was lying to me or not, I can actually feel this one goes 25, 30 degrees. This normal one goes a lot farther.
And there's no weird feeling.
And there's no weird feeling. Now, a spinal problem will not do that. That will not occur in a spinal problem. Very often, because the hip is connected to the back, the shin bone's connected to the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone, and there's a song. The problem is that if you just judge the person by an MRI, we're going to say he's got a herniated disc or a torn disc and never even examine the patient. But if you examine the patient, his back functions well, but his hip does not. Like McFly, okay? So that's what clued us in to the hip. Then there's something called arthrogenic muscle inhibition. And what this means is when a joint does not function well, is damaged, whatever, the muscles around the area won't feel very strong. So what we did, and let's test it today, see how it works. Hold it right there, hold it real strong. Now right there, there's I'm gonna say it's 90% of what I want.
Yeah.
If I take it here, if I take this one, this is strong.
I also have no pain when you do that. I have pain in here when you do it on this side.
Right. But when he first came in,
Straight down.
I had him raise his leg, and I just pushed with my finger, and it just flopped down. He had a major arthrogenic muscle inhibition, which means that when the joint is bad, the muscles, no matter how brutally strong a person is, they just can't contract. If you dislocate your elbow, your bicep is not going to want to contract. When you have the labrum tear in your shoulder, I could probably put your arm up here, and doesn't matter how much you work out, your muscle is going to be inhibited.
Yeah.
So that was a second clue. The third clue is if you go back and listen to the patient's history, what was their history? Their history was, gee, I had a muscle injury to my groin in high school, but it kind of recovered, didn't notice it. Then he had a jiu-jitsu injury. If you know anything about jiu-jitsu,
Lots of this.
this is something I would try to win a jiu-jitsu match in, but there's a lots of unvariable movements that you have no control over where you can strain, and we always think muscle, but in your particular case, there's something we don't think about. It's the joint. So what we're trying to do, I think, is we're trying to get an MRI with contrast.
I just got it yesterday.
You got it yesterday, so we're gonna get the
2 days
results,
ago.
because we're suspicious that he may have an underlying labral tear. The thing that sucks is that if we don't have the MRI, we can't prove it.
Just guessing.
Well, yes, we are guessing. But we're not guessing, because if you listen to the person's history, groin injury, it could have been a small labral injury when you were in high school. Jiu-jitsu, forget about it there, okay? Secondly, he's got muscle weakness, arthrogenic muscle inhibition. That happens with labral tears. His pain is in the groin. He doesn't have any positive findings of a disc injury. It's all leading, in my view, to the hip. Now the question is, what else can it be? Because as soon as you find out that it's the hip joint, you have to think to yourself, well, what else could be contributing to his pain? He could have had, in one injury, a muscle tear that would cause scar tissue in the muscles, particularly when we're examining them, and I'll show you here in a second. The pectineus adductor magnus. Those are the two muscles that when I examine his muscles, you could feel, the muscles don't feel like raw steak, they feel like beef jerky, for lack of a better word. That's what adhesions or scar tissue feels like. So when a person has had a muscle injury, their muscles don't feel normal.
Right.
So you could have had a torn labrum, adhesions in the muscle, but the key is, if you're a chiropractor and you're adjusting his L4, but his actual damaged area is his labrum or an adhesion, you're going to get nowhere. So when you throw darts, you got to hit it in the bullseye. The closer to the bullseye we get, the better. The more information we have, the closer we can get to the bullseye. The problem with MRIs, there's a lot of false positives.
Right.
So I can take any active guy. I can go in outside, how old are you?
24.
24. I can take a guy who's 24 years old, find a surfer, find a guy who's done jiu-jitsu, find a guy who plays beach volleyball, and MRI his spine, and I'm going to see some strain somewhere. That doesn't mean it's a problem for him. So let me show you what we did for treatment. So first thing is, what we're going to do. All right, so the first muscle I'm going to work on is the adductor magnus. And so I'm just using some type of lotion here so it doesn't rip up the hair. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fully flex. So this is kind of an active myofascial release. I'm going to grab on into his adductor magnus, and no patient likes this, so you just have to tell the patient to grin and bear it, and flex the hip. Now what I'm doing is I'm bringing the hip up to the outside, and with this hand, what I'm doing is I'm feeling the muscle. I'm feeling where it gives me a resistance so that I know where to focus. And right in there, it doesn't like my hand being there because it feels like I'm trying to massage beef jerky rather than a raw steak. Normal muscle feels like up in here, it's soft, it's pliable, it's as if there's raw steak in there. That's how you know. So we're going to do a number of passes on the adductor magnus. Now, we're going to do the pectineus muscle, and this is a small muscle, and this is what I suspect was the first injury. And I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it just feels like when you first pulled your groin, this
Way
was
back
the
in the
spot,
day, yeah.
way back in the day. And
Yeah.
people can have injuries.
Didn't bother me for years.
It doesn't bother you for years unless you strain it.
Yeah, which I did that one day probably.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Because that was your weak link.
Yeah.
So this is typical with people, is they will have an injury, and if they're not active, doesn't bother them. Do you know on days when I ride my bike, my legs never hurt? Duh, right? So I'm on the pectineus muscle. It's best to tell jokes when you do this type of myofascial release to cut the tension for the patient, because usually they don't like this.
It's not as bad actually.
It's not as bad as it has been.
Yeah, it was really bad the first couple of days.
Yeah.
Still not super fun though.
This is never fun. Almost done. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to distract the entire hip joint. And what I'm doing here is, if there's a labrum tear, this is not a great idea, but if you do it gently, it won't be so bad, but it seems to help him. So we'll see what the results are of the MRI, but hopefully there's not a big tear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Athletes tear labrums, by the way. They tear shoulders, they tear hips, they tear meniscus in the knees. If you're gonna do crazy sports like surfing and jiu-jitsu, stuff happens, unfortunately. It's impossible to be athletic and not have problems, at some point in your life.
I almost feel like if there was a labrum tear, this would hurt way more than it does.
Well, that's why I
This never
suspect
hurts.
if there was a labrum tear,
Yeah.
if there was a big one,
Yeah.
we wouldn't do this because
Yeah.
it'd be really bad. But
Yeah, it's not hurting.
if there is one, I suspect it's small.
Small,
Yeah. Okay. So just for kicks and giggles, as they say, when you first came in, your leg did not want me pushing on it because, it just went down. Now I notice I can tell a difference in strength, but it's holding up good.
Yeah, much better.
But you feel it still.
Yeah.
So I want to see what I feel with the strength, and you tell me what you feel. So hold it real strong. Okay, no, did it still hurt?
Still hurts, but it feels way stronger.
It feels stronger.
I can feel the pain shoots. It's like doesn't even shoot isn't the right word. It's just there.
Just right in there.
Yeah, it doesn't shoot. Shooting's not the right word. It's just
Right.
there.
So,
But it feels stronger.
So again, with your situation, is the only reason when you came in, the only reason I thought hip was because the story you told me of how you strained a groin, and I always think, well, how do we know it was a groin? Could have been a small labrum, that type of thing, but it could have been the groin. And then jiu-jitsu, and I've done jiu-jitsu before, and I know how many injuries I had in jiu-jitsu, right? And so you start thinking, and then surfing is you could fall in weird angles and stuff. So I just I didn't like the fact that you brought in an MRI and everybody was treating the back.
Right.
Because I thought, this doesn't make sense. And then when I tested you for the spine, I'm sitting here going, the guy clearly can't touch his toes, but he feels equal tension on his hamstrings.
Yeah.
Sciatica doesn't do that. And so I think it was what's called a false positive. It was a finding, but it wasn't important in regard to your condition. And then when I tried to do all these tests, bringing the hip up, okay, so it's
Yeah.
going farther
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
even after just one treatment, but
But still,
But it's still, you
something
feel it.
feels off in here.
so,
I was actually going to ask you, unrelated to the video, but do you think yoga would be a good exercise for this kind of a thing, or do you think that makes
Actually-
it worse because it's stretching it?
actually, let's get the results of the MRI first before we decide.
Okay.
I'm gonna do one more thing, we'll do this off camera, but
I was curious what you thought about the yoga.
Yeah, I'll tell you.